Falcons 2023 defensive outlook. And I got to give credit to the Falcons. Y'all really love this video on YouTube. The Falcons fan base is deep. The NFL fan base is deep in general. It'd be crazier if we had more than 32 teams. But the Falcons added Calais Campbell on Friday, just before we rolled over onto the 1st of April. And now, just this season, the Falcons have added Jesse Bates from the Bengals, Caden Ellis, Mike Hughes, Calais Campbell, David Onyemata. Those are just the pickups to go alongside an A.J. Terrell, a Lorenzo Carter, a Grady Jarrett. Imagine if they still had Foye Oluokun. And let's take a look at the Falcons defense from last year with these additions. This is going to help clean up everything, literally. Last year, they were 6th worst in yards given up, 8th worst in passing yards given up, 10th worst in rushing yards given up, 10th worst in points given up, 9th worst in turnover margin, 6th worst in total takeaways, and 2nd worst in the league in defensive sacks. So really, to agree with you there, Bruns, talk about a big rebuild for the Falcons and what they were able to do with that defensive line. And, again, that's a reason I didn't have them taking one in the draft, because Calais Campbell and Caden Ellis are going to help with that aspect. But you do want to get a young guy, a guy that can maybe turn into a star player. Again, it would be crazy if y'all were able to grab Nolan Smith, Georgia guy, been able to stay right in Georgia in that Falcons uniform. Going to be an absolute monster. So the Falcons defense was rough last year all the way around. And with them adding all these pieces, making some big moves in free agency, I'm very proud of the Falcons, because we've seen them. The Super Bowl year, defense was okay, offense was great. And the Falcons offense has had a tendency year over year until, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones left town, unfortunately. That was an offense that could hang with some of the biggest in the league. But the defense was also consistently giving up 27, 31, 28, 24 points. And that's hard. That's really hard to win a football game giving up that many points, let alone just giving up maybe 20 or 21 points in an NFL game. So knowing that the Falcons will have one of their better defenses in years, they're going to have an elite safety. They're going to have an elite corner, talking about Jesse Bates, talking about A.J. Terrell. They have a great, probably B+, A- player that they just picked up in Caden Ellis. Mike Hughes was a former first-round pick as a corner. Calais Campbell, yes, is 36 years old, but he's going to bring that veteran presence. At one point, he was one of the best edge rushers, or one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. If David Onyemata can stay healthy, he's got a lot of depth coming over from New Orleans. Grady Jarrett is hit or miss, but he'll give you maybe 5 or 6 sacks a year, which is serviceable. A.J. Terrell, major leaps over just the first few years in the NFL. He's an elite corner already. And then Lorenzo Carter, I believe, coming over from the Giants. Solid pickup as well. Again, not a guy that's going to do major things for you, but he can be serviceable at times. Now, what are some strengths that the Falcons could have coming up this year? I think the pass rush, again, is going to really, really improve. The Falcons were 2nd worst in the league in defensive sacks last year. I remember at one point in one of their recent seasons, they had more sacks against the Saints in one game than they had all year. So we know that the defensive line has been a struggle for Atlanta before. And, the more I talk about this, probably the next draft, I will have Atlanta taking a defensive lineman, maybe making a trade to go up and get a Jalen Carter or a Nolan Smith. But I think the pass rush, again, will improve. Caden Ellis had, I think, 7 or 8 sacks last year and just 11 starts as the linebacker, as mainly playing at the linebacker position for the Saints. Gets this contract with the Falcons because of how he played with the Saints, and I think he's going to be great in situational pass rushing. He can also drop back in coverage as well. Calais Campbell, like I just mentioned, David Onyemata, like I just mentioned. If these guys can stay healthy and give you some good depth, really mentioning the Calais Campbell and David Onyemata pickups, it's going to be solid. It's going to be very solid. Grady Jarrett and, Lorenzo Carter, those are like B to C players roughly, and they can produce. So I think the Falcons really could be top 15 in defensive sacks and really just a top 15 defense overall. You're going to have an elite player again in Jesse Bates and A.J. Terrell, 2 elite players in your secondary. That's going to be one of the nicer secondaries, one of the nicer safety cornerback combos or duos in the NFL. Caden Ellis, again, can drop back in coverage. Mike Hughes is a solid signing, former first-round corner. And so, again, I think they'll be top 15 in defensive passing yards, top 15 in defensive sacks. And I think that's just going to naturally bring everything up. If you can rush the quarterback, which will definitely affect the rushing game, and if you can do well on the back end in the secondary, that's going to help you out overall in the NFL. No question. No question about that. And again, I'm proud of the Falcons spending that free agency money, giving Jesse Bates one of the biggest contracts for a safety and paying him as one of the biggest safeties and one of the most well-paid safeties in the NFL this year. The Falcons were second in cap space. They had something to do. They had something to, take care of with that defense. They believe in Desmond Ritter. Excuse me. They've got Drake London. They're going to be bringing in Jackson Smith and Jigba. So just knowing how this team is going to be looking to make some turnarounds this year, bringing in those players, I think is really going to help them on the defensive aspect. And I'm positive for the Falcons this coming year. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on the defense.